All right, it's live.
We can elevate him to be a panelist if you join that way.
All right, let's go turn the cameras on.
All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. My name is Karen Carter with Urban Peace Institute. We're so happy to have you here this morning at the American Rescue Plan virtual briefing. If you are already here and you're in the space, we ask that you would just write in the chat where you're joining us from. We just want to know who's in the audience. So write to us where you're from, write to us what part of the city you're in, or if you're from another area, just shout yourself out so we know who's all in the space this morning. Nice, good morning, good morning. I see some people from Breaking Through Barriers to Success, some people with Healing Dialogue in Action LA. Good morning, a Moms Demand volunteer all the way from San Jose. Thank you so much for tuning in. The San Francisco Bay Area, thank you all so much for your support and for being present and tuning into what's happening with us down here in Southern California. Santa Ana Moms the Mom Action volunteer, thank you so much for being here. Miss Andrea Wilson and Kelly Fisher from the LA County Office of Violence Prevention, thank you so much for your presence this morning and for being in this space. We really, really appreciate it. So we're going to get started before too long, but we just want to welcome you and thank you so much for your attendance. And we will be getting started shortly. Ooh, Claudia Bracho from Helper Foundation, representing, the Venice area. Miss Paula Litt from Alhambra, welcome, welcome, welcome. Miss Annette from Mission Lab. I know that's right, on Tongva land, and happy to be supporting UPI. Thank you so much for your support. We do want to take an opportunity to uplift and acknowledge the indigenous people of this land, the Tongva people on whose land we stand, and really want to take opportunity and make space to recognize that this land is indigenous land. So thank you so much for that, Miss Annette. And yes, from Miss Molly Leach. Yes, the Cheyenne people. So we definitely want to take an opportunity to acknowledge that. Pastor Johnson from MMBI Reimagine South LA. Thank you so much for your presence today, for being in this space today. So thank you all so much. We're so excited to have you all here. Excuse me, we're going to get started in about 3 to 4 minutes. Wonderful. So for those who are just joining, we're asking that people would put where they're from in the chat. So wherever you are joining us from, whatever part of the city or part of the state or part of the country that you're joining us from, we ask that you put that in the chat just so we can know who is in the space and just acknowledge your presence and show some gratitude for you being present with us this morning. Yes, we have the San Fernando Valley here this morning. Hi, thank you so much for joining. Ooh, New York, hello, one of my favorite places. Good morning, Miss Georgia Leap from UCLA. Thank you so much for your presence this morning. We appreciate you being here. Wonderful, the Western Justice Center, the San Gabriel Valley. Thank you for your presence. South Central's in the house. Always happy to see it. Always happy to see it. Yes, the Woodland Hills, thank you so much for being here this morning.
And good morning, everyone. As we get ready to start our virtual briefing, I just wanted to take a minute to let you know you can type any questions you have of the panelists. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of our briefing. We're reserving the last 10 to 15 minutes for that discussion. So please drop any of your questions into the chat function and we'll try to answer all your questions in the order they are received. And I'll keep note of them throughout the panelists speaking.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'm going to read out some more of this participation. Who else is in the house? We have, who else we got in this space today? We got Moms Demand Action from Sacramento, Sacktown. Welcome. So glad to have you here. Southern California Crossroads. Good morning. Good morning. We have Miss Molly from Colorado, all the way from Colorado. Yes, it is still freezing in Colorado. Y'all don't get spring weather until well into May. So I hope you're wrapped up and you're staying warm. Miss Veronica from ACE in the West San Fernando Valley. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Breaking Through Barriers to Success is president in the house. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tammy Amoto from Chair Hilda Solis's office is here. Thank you for your presence. Anaheim residents, we got Watts Life United, Resilient Agency is in the house. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for your presence. And we are actually going to get started. And so stay tuned.
So hi, everyone. We're going to get started in one moment. I just want to say again, if you have any questions as you hear our panelists speak today, please drop them into the chat. You can send them to all panelists and I will keep track of them. And we're reserving the last 10 to 15 minutes of our presentation for that Q&A session. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our MC today, which will be Fernando Rejon of the Urban Peace Institute.
All right, thank you, everybody. Happy to see folks, happy to see a lot of familiar names, a lot of the peacemakers in LA. Welcome to the Fund Peacemakers American Rescue Plan virtual briefing. And thank you for joining us today in support of LA's peacemakers. So as part of the Biden administration stimulus package, there's a national investment of $1.9 trillion to boost the economy and address the multiple public health crises we're experiencing: the COVID pandemic, gun violence, and American racism. California is receiving $26 billion, LA County $1.9 billion, and LA City $1.3 billion in American Rescue Plan funds. We anticipate guidance from the White House that encourages governors and mayors to utilize portions of the ARP funds to address community level violence. In the Biden administration's recent press conference on gun violence, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, stated, "Community violence intervention programs are a priority. This is an important moment in our country and for the peace movement to address the community level impacts of gun violence that have been overlooked for too long." The Los Angeles Violence Intervention Coalition is composed of 16 frontline community intervention agencies and groups focused on ending the gun violence epidemic in LA. Peacemaking has a long history in LA, and this group represents the heart of the peace movement. These women and men have been on the front lines mitigating community violence and fighting the pandemic, risking their lives to help save the lives of others. During the pandemic, they have been pulling double duty, interrupting community violence, passing out food and PPE, and promoting public health education to keep folks safe as Black and Brown communities experience a disproportionate surge in violence and COVID infections. Of the $3.2 billion coming to the LA region, the coalition is asking for $400 million to be invested in community-based public safety efforts to end over-reliance on law enforcement and broaden the scope of safety. We are asking for $150 million from the city of LA and $250 million from LA County over a 3-year period. Specific investments include salary adjustments and hero pay for ground level intervention workers. Workers in LA have not received a raise in over 10 years and still begin at a $33,000 a year salary. Additionally, we want to go from 130 peacemakers in the LA region to 1,000 peacemakers in the city and county. We need a strong and sustained workforce, community-based workforce, to help lead our new vision for safety. These strategies work. We have the evidence to back our efforts, and the country needs to fully embrace the work of peacemakers. The LA Violence Intervention Coalition has joined the National Fund Peace campaign, an alliance with groups throughout the country advocating for over $5 billion in funding over the next 8 years. We are also organizing to launch the Fund Peace California campaign to support groups throughout the state providing community violence intervention services. Additionally, we are in support of our sisters and brothers in Chicago, who are launching a campaign to ask for $100 million of city ARP funds to be invested in peacemakers in their city. We are going to hear directly from LA peacemakers on the front lines today. But first, I would like to introduce a true champion for our work in LA, a public leader who has fought for years for dollars to be routed to our communities to address the multiple issues we face. We are honored to be joined this morning by Councilmember Marqueece Harris-Dawson.
Good morning. Thank you, Fernando, for the rousing introduction, and thank you to everybody here on this Zoom. I see almost 75 people here this morning to talk about what I think is the best and the right approach to public safety in our communities, and indeed the future of public safety, not only in Los Angeles, but in the country. Let me say off top, before I even start sort of jabbering, I am in full support and enthusiastically endorse your call for resources, $400 million in the city and county of Los Angeles, and the call nationwide to the work that you all do, showing up when someone needs to show up with the right touch, the right interaction, but most importantly, the right values and the right relationship with the community. Gone are the days that I think we can have a public safety system that relies on shipping people in, putting them in some kind of academy or some type of training, and then putting them out on our streets where they don't have a connection to the people, they don't have a connection to the history, and they don't have the connection to the hopes and dreams for the future of the folks in that community. And so I think you all are at a great moment. You know, as a community activist and sometimes as a person who likes to spend time visioning, there are those moments when the world catches up to your vision or history catches up to your vision. And that really is what has happened in the last year. The world has understood that the current way we do public safety doesn't work. That it takes other aspects. And you all are a key plank in that. Interventionist, community intervention, relationship-based safety work is the future. And that future has showed up really quickly between sort of last June and now. And so we're happy that the stars are aligned. We know that that doesn't mean that we don't have to fight. We still have to fight and push for it. But I think our communities, again, deserve us putting our best foot forward and delivering a victory, frankly, on this. And I think delivering the kind of safety that we all deserve in our community. So with that, thank you so much. This gives us the opportunity to really move intervention into the place that it should be, not only in the city, but in the county of Los Angeles. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you for your ongoing support of the work in LA. We appreciate you taking the time to join us and support our efforts. With that, we're going to move to our first peacemaker to speak. We have Tina Padilla with Breaking Through Barriers to Success in Northeast LA. She's a vocal coalition leader and passionate peacemaker in her community. We're happy to have her here today to speak. Tina.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Tina Padilla, and I am program manager for an intervention agency in Northeast Los Angeles. I have seen my community at its worst, and I can truly say I am part of the change. I am a peacekeeper. Being a peacekeeper in my community is a title that I am truly passionate about. I am on call 24/7, and whenever I'm out and about in my community, I'm always working, keeping my community safe, and always looking for ways to improve my community. During this worldwide pandemic, the roles of myself and my staff have been given an extra title. Besides being peacekeepers, we are now virus interrupters. We exist at the intersection of public health and public safety, putting our lives at risk and our families as well. I say our families because during the pandemic, we put our community first and continue to service our community with the risk of possibly taking the virus home to our families. The main reason we're able to do this is because we work in the communities and have a license to operate in our respective communities. Our community trusts us. Community-based organizations, or CBOs, violence intervention programs in Los Angeles, are integral and foundational aspects to community-based safety, both as violence interrupters and virus interrupters. When you think of the word intervention, it means an action taken to improve any given situation. That is exactly what we do day in and day out, 24/7. We don't take breaks. Even when we're sick, we work. For example, we lost a very good peacekeeper not long ago, and days before he passed, he was making calls to make sure his community got the turkeys for Thanksgiving so they could celebrate with their families. Another peacekeeper actually called into our meeting from his hospital bed. So when I say we never take time off, I truly mean this. We are always working. I say all this because this job is much more to us than a job. It's our calling. It's our passion. It comes from our hearts. We go into communities at the most crucial times with no gun, no badge, and no bulletproof vest, and we're still able to calm tensions. We go in with only our word, and that is our word as peacekeepers. We do rumor control, which prevents further bloodshed in our streets. Our streets are experiencing so many negative influence right now. This is the important time to invest in our communities in order to stop the bleeding, to stop a mother from feeling the pain of losing two sons, to stop a mother who lost her only daughter. This is the most crucial time to invest in us as peacekeepers already doing the work by expanding our budget to enhance the services we already offer so that we can expand our numbers and put more peacekeepers on the streets of our communities. President Biden in his recent White House announcement has called for $5 billion investment over 8 years in support of evidence-based community violence intervention programs. If this can be recognized at a national level, we need to make sure here on a local level that we can invest in community-based organization programs which are already hard at work. Here in Northeast Los Angeles, we are populated about 166,000 people. About 62,000 are between the ages of 14 to 25. I have a staff of 7. This is not nearly enough to be able to help the community in an effective manner. LA County and LA City must invest $400 million of the $1.9 billion County American Rescue Plan funds into Peacemakers in order for us to hire more staff and make sure that the current staff we have are paid at a competitive living wage. Without investment in community-based violence intervention programs, it is impossible for the city and the county of Los Angeles to provide a robust and effective community-based public safety program. Let's invest in our city together for public safety and health. Let's invest in those that make the community a better place. Let's invest in those that have seen the community at its worst and work every day to make it a better place. We need to accept the obvious fact that sometimes a toxic community can make people sick with fear and sick with violence and bloodshed. The intervention programs, peacekeepers, the White House, and local governmental agencies must come together to find a healing, purposeful solution to these issues. So I call upon you again to please invest $400 million into peacekeeping efforts by making sure this money reaches local community-based organizations to heal all our communities and make sure it's a safer place for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina. And thank you for your powerful words. And I do want to acknowledge and say the names of the peacemakers we lost last year: Mike Arian, Brother Jeffrey Harmon, and Everly Naras. So with that, we are going to our next peacemaker. We have Skipp Townsend with Second Call, a longtime and well-respected peacemaker throughout South LA and a vocal leader working to dispel the myths about our communities. I'll hand it over to Brother Skipp.
Thank you, Fernando, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate you guys being on the call this morning. My name is Skipp Townsend. I am born and raised in Los Angeles, a community activist and a community intervention worker for over 15 years, and I'm the executive director of Second Call. My ask this morning is for the $400 million of the $1.9 billion from the American Rescue Plan money to fund the work of intervention, the peacemakers and the peacekeepers, Sometimes the only peace in the city is the peace that we bring with us. We go places where there may not be peace. So as peacemakers, we bring the peace. Without this investment in our people, the investment will go to systems that have proven not to work, systems that have separated our people by calling them suspects, victims, inmates, defendants, survivors. They call them anything but a human being. Changing the name of a park, adding more police officers, or buying military type equipment isn't a proactive strategy to bring peace to our city. There are so many politicians and leaders who I've heard say how to reimagine our city and the love that they have for our city. So the investment then goes to our city. However, as a peacemaker, we actually have the people. We love the people, and actually all the people in our city. I'm asking now for this American Rescue Plan money to fund the work of the peacekeepers so we can have non-confrontational, non-threatening community members to continue a proactive strategy in creating safe spaces to start the healing in our community from all community issues and creating a safe and healthier Los Angeles. I ask you guys to support the work of the peacemakers. And remember, the life you save may be your own. Thank you guys for having me on this morning.
Thank you, Brother Skipp. Well said. Next, the next peacekeeper we have we are honored to have Blinky Rodriguez with Champions in Service in the San Fernando Valley. He's an elder and a longtime leader of LA's peace movement. Blinky has worked for decades to end violence and build bridges to save lives. Hand it over to you, Blinky. Hey, Blinky, are you there? You're on mute, Blink.
Sorry about that, you guys. You know how it is with Zoom. But for those of you that do know me, my name is William Blinky Rodriguez. I'm multi-generational. My grandparents got here to the city of San Fernando in 1917.
Sorry, Blinky, can you turn your camera on, please?
I am so sorry, everybody. I guess this technology is getting to me these days. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Blinky Rodriguez. I'm multi-generational here in Los Angeles, actually by way of the San Fernando Valley. My grandparents got to San Fernando in 1917. I had a son murdered in 1990, and that's when my work began to promote peace in the community, to deal with families that were going through this despair and that valley of death, that dimension that you can't really even articulate in words. And what I want to remind everybody, the spirit in which we're doing this work is to meet the needs of people, to promote peace in the community. But when there's peace in the city prospers. You know, we're first responders to yellow tape. Yellow tape was created by way back when many of us interventionists would follow helicopters in the city and show up to the yellow tape. Now there's a more refined protocol that we're able to come alongside families, mothers, families that are there howling the cries like a coyote because they've lost their loved one. And so that has led us to be able to help facilitate burials and provide services, not just post-burial, but pre-burial, but post-burial. There's many people that their phones stop ringing, their doors stop knocking. Once a month or two goes by, and those families are isolated with much, much pain. You know, I also want to compel the city, the county, to fund this work, this intervention work for $4 million out of the American Rescue Plan. You know, since the pandemic, homicides have gone up 30.9%, victims shot 74.5%. You know, law enforcement knows that intervention in this city works because they've seen it for themselves. You know, the other piece, you know, we've come a long ways, you guys. This city is in better shape than a lot of people want to give credit for. And a lot of it has to do with the work of the intervention workers. laying our lives on the line, the silent heroes, the people that are out there day in, day out like the tide. And we've learned to respect the old-fashioned way by doing what we say and saying what we do, being right there with them families. There's many holistic approaches. There's jobs, you know, there's education. All those things are essential. But it doesn't mean much if your kids are getting shot down in the streets of LA. And so intervention workers have committed their lives. We've laid them down. I laid my life down a long time ago for this work. You know, I want to say also there's a lot of accountability, a lot of structure that's been put in place to this work, the ability to quantify and qualify this work, the data collection that we're able to provide now to embellish what the city of LA is doing. So today I want to compel you. I'm coming to you saying, look, it's time. We've been out here on the highways and the byways of this city for many, many, many years. And the dollars have been set aside by President Biden to be able to come into the cities throughout the country to be able to provide this service. So I want to thank you all right now for being a part of this. I want to thank Councilman Marqueece Dawson also. It's been a long journey, but the best is yet to come. We've not seen the best, and I just want to thank you guys for attending this conference, and we're looking forward to this work. It's an exciting time, and there is a silver lining for us to keep our eyes on as we collectively do this work. God bless you guys.
Thank you, Blinky. And you're right, the best is yet to come. I love that. All right, next we have Mr. Kevin Orange, another peacemaker in South LA, also known as Brother Twin, from Advocates for Peace and Urban Unity in South LA. Twin has been a leader and at the forefront of peace efforts in one of South LA's deadliest areas for years. So we're happy to have him join us today and share some words.
Good morning, everyone. As my brother Fernando said, my name is Kevin Orange, and I'm also affectionately known as Twin from the community I come from, which is Westmont community. I am the co-founder for Advocates for Peace and Urban Unity, which oversees the South LA and the Westmont community. I'm also the regional coordinator for Solidarity, Enrichment, and Action, who I've been employed with for the last 10 years. And what I would like to talk about is the $400 million that's coming from the $1.9 billion county American Rescue Plan funds. And so I want to speak on how would it impact our community. I know what our community look like without funding. Because like I said, I grew up in the Westmont community, and without the funding, it was deemed Death Alley. And with that, we didn't have the resources to combat the violence and the killings that was going on in our community for the last 40 years. So what this funding would do, it would give us the right people to do training, because I think training is critical for our community in helping us deal with conflict resolutions. Because just the simplest conflict can cause chaos in our communities, and we recognize that for the last 40 years from the gang violence that plagued our communities. And so with the right training from people from lived experience, I think it'll do our community a tremendous good. And dealing with trauma, I think trauma is another area that plagued our communities. And with this this $400 million from the $1.9 billion, I think it would do our community a tremendous good, because trauma had plagued our communities for years. And like one of my brothers, Skipp Townsend, talk about unresolved trauma. Unresolved trauma is something that I've seen plague our community as well as myself. I didn't know I had suffered from trauma through the years from all the killings and violence that I've seen and witnessed in the community. I was also a person that suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. So once again, I think that money could be greatly utilized in helping us get our community to a better and safer place. And also with the funding, it will help us open up more healing centers, so we can deal with the people that have been plagued with this violence that we've been living with in these communities. And with the healing centers, we can have these healing circles that can help people better cope with trauma, because that is something that our communities became used to, is dealing with trauma and violence when that's not a normal way in a state of mind for anyone to live in. And so with that, I will always like to make sure that we don't forget about the victims that lost their life senselessly in these communities. And so with that funding, I think it'll do us a great deal so that we won't have to go back to a community that we had to call Death Alley. Because we have some wonderful people that's in these communities that need to live in a safe nonviolent space. So thank you for letting me share this morning with you. And please consider us for this $400 million from the American Rescue Plan funds. Thank you.
Great job, Twin. Thank you. So last but not least, in batting cleanup, we have Paul Carrillo with Giffords Law Center. Paul is the co-founder of Southern California Crossroads in LA and has recently transitioned to the Director of Community Violence Initiatives at Giffords. He's a homegrown peacemaker and true advocate for our communities.
Thank you for the introduction, Fernando. It's a beautiful thing to see all the brothers and sisters on here on the panel and in the audience. You know, as Fernando said, I come from Los Angeles, live and work in Black and brown communities. And, you know, it was no surprise to me that when we worked with Department of Public Health to respond to the rise in COVID-19 cases, we were given maps. And when we looked at the maps of the areas that were most impacted as far as people dying and infections, they were the same neighborhoods that had been plagued by violence and poverty and substance abuse for years. And so I just want to remind folks that this 5 billion is not guaranteed yet. And this event here today is part of the push that we all have to make and continue to do together to ensure that the 5 billion remains in the budget and that it is distributed the right way and gets to folks on the ground, like many of the people that are on this Zoom today. So I just want to thank everybody for attending and just remind you to please continue to help us push. We have to do it together. It's going to be a lot of back and forth in politicking over the next couple of months on the local level, state level, and federal level. And so we have to continue to attend events like this and sign letters and make phone calls and send emails and support each other and put all of the nonsense and disagreements aside that folks might have had over the years for the sake of the greater good to make sure that we get more resources for our people. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. And I want to just shout out all the organizations that are part of the LA Violence Intervention Coalition. We have Chapter 2 with Gerald Cavett, P, out there in South LA. Of course, Second Call with Skipp, you've heard from APUU, you heard from Twin. ACE, who's out there in the Valley. Champions in Service, you heard from Blinky. Breaking Through Barriers to Success, you heard from Tina. Helper Foundation, out there in Venice, the Venice area. You have Ansar Mohammed and Claudia Bracho leading that. You have the Southern California Ceasefire Committee, which is a huge group of individuals and organizations that have been meeting for a long time to help end violence in South LA. Southern California Crossroads, Detours, you have Brother Taco out there, Resilient, Mike Goodell, Soledad Enrichment Action, you have Nathan Arias and Virna Romero and a bunch of peacemakers that they have working with them. Toberman Center in the Harbor area, you have Darlene Kean and Russell Martinez and Javier Martinez helping to run that. Volunteers of America, Los Angeles, you have Donnie Gomez, who's leading the intervention efforts there. And then you have RACE, Reclaiming America's Communities Through Empowerment. And you have Ronaldo Reeser, who's running that, and he works out in some of the county areas. And so we are linking some of the city with county areas. Violence knows no boundaries. And so we're pushing for funds to address a more regional approach that goes beyond city and county boundaries to ensure that violence in our communities ends. And so the more resources that we have, the more that we can invest in these non-traditional public safety practices, the safer our communities will be. And we have data to back it up. We have evaluations that have been done not only in LA, but also across the country. And so we are linked to the Fund Peace campaign nationally, but also to communities as well as peacemakers in cities across the country. And so our work really extends beyond LA, and we have synergistic relationships with folks like our brothers and sisters in Chicago with Communities Partnering for Peace, with Chicago Cred, folks out in Oakland with Oakland Unite, the Department of Violence Prevention, doing their work, and building more relationships with folks in New York and other cities throughout the country. And so we want to support that and really build and support this movement. With that, we'll open it up for questions. So if the panelists can turn their cameras on, maybe we could facilitate some questions.
So I'll start with the first question that came up during our presentation, and it's how do we know peacemakers can effectively reduce gun and gang violence?
All right. Someone want to jump in on that one?
Well, I would point to the, we've been talking a lot, opportunities that we get, the evaluations and data and improving effectiveness of contracted intervention workers by Cal State LA in the grid office. I would point to those reports that have come out, I think last year, and they have a website. Maybe we can put it in the chat where you can access all of the reports that Cal State LA, Harder and Company, and other evaluation experts have published in tracking and showing the effectiveness of the intervention agencies that are contracted through the grid.
Thank you. Skipp, you want to add to that?
Well, I was going to add to that, but the one thing that's hard to do is always to track people who are alive. It's so much easier to track how many homicides we attended, how many shootings there were. But if you imagine each one of our agencies and organizations that we work with, and we're dealing with so many young people, so many even middle-aged people. And the one thing that I always do is when I see them, I'm happy that they're not dead or in jail. And that's one of the ways that we measure the work in our community. When people are out there working, when people are out there doing better for themselves and doing for their families, it's kind of hard to measure success when we're talking about live people. It's much easier to talk about the narrative on the negative side. So I like what Paul said. Let's go get the stats. Let's go. And I'm against research, but let's go use the research now.
Yeah, and I agree.
Thank you. Can you turn your camera on, Blink? And then Twin and Tina, or Tina's
my camera's not going on. It says my video was turned off by the host.
Same here. Same here.
Okay, we'll adjust it. So just to throw out some quick stats from some of the reports that Paul was referencing, there's a 41% reduction in retaliatory violence in South LA over a 2-year period attributed to the work of intervention. And the stat that I really like to share a lot is that when LAPD alone responds to a gang-related homicide, the chance for a retaliatory homicide is 26%. When LAPD and gang intervention in their separate lanes respond to a gang-related homicide, the chance for a retaliatory incident drops dramatically to below 1%. It drops to 0.7%. So that correlation between the work of peacemakers is really important. And that's part of the narrative that we want to put out nationally to say that these investments work. Next question. Do we have any other questions?
We do. We have 2 more queued up here. So there's some questions about who are the specific entities that need to be lobbied to ensure you receive this $400 billion in funds. I think people want to know how we can get more involved in making sure we lobby to the right agencies.
All right. Anyone want to touch that one? Tina? Twin?
Yes, definitely. So I would say that question came from actually one of my staff here. So definitely we'll just keep doing the things that we're doing now. Just keep reaching out, just being shown presence in the community, and just continue to just show presence and reach out to your city officials, reach out to the county officials, just keep the momentum going, and join a coalition like we have going on here, so that we can be able to organize together and strategize and come together, because strength is in numbers. So when you're showing the strength in numbers and you have the data to back it up that this really does work, that's what people are going to look for, and that's what we can do. Just keep showing presence and coalitions together.
And for
Thank you,
me,
Tina. Go ahead, Twin.
Yeah, and for me, I always think our local, federal entities that can play a major part in this, because as we've seen for this last year, how the protesters was out there, how the community was speaking about reimagining on public safety. And it's just with us with reimagining intervention. I think that the people have spoken, you know, and if we've been speaking behind closed doors and stuff about the importance of having an intervention in these communities, effective intervention. So with the support of our local officials, reallocating funding to these communities would do us a greater good, you know, because we done established some wonderful relationships and some understanding with law enforcement. And so they understand the work that intervention actually does in the community, what we do and what we don't do. Because that misconception of that intervention workers are working for the police is not true. It's just we work for the community, we work for the people, we work for the people that done lost their lives that was once here, that's no longer here. That's who we speak for. We speak for the volumes of people that go home every night, go to sleep. We up working, networking, strategizing, you know, implementing things to make sure that they don't lose their life, as well as keeping ourselves alive.
Thank you, Twin. Well said. And to support, you can join our campaign. We can put that in the chat, the link to sign on to the campaign. We have to lobby and speak directly to the mayor. We need to support from the council members. In the county, we need support from the CEO's office and all the supervisors. And so last week, before the mayor released his budget, we sent a letter from the coalition to the mayor and CC'd all the council members asking for the $150 million investment of ARP funds. With the county, we're in the process of developing a letter to send to all the supervisors' offices and CEOs to really generate support around the $250 million ask. So joining in coalitions, if you're part of a coalition, you know, supporting our cause. We've been supporting a lot of the movement in LA County around like youth justice uprising, also with the Reimagine LA and looking at the Measure J dollars being invested in gang intervention as well. We've been pushing heavily for that. So those are some of the campaigns that we're supporting, but that can all lead to building more community-based safety and health and ensuring that we're shrinking the footprint of the criminal justice system that has imposed itself on our communities.
If I can, I'd like to also say that we need to get the support like we have had from the universities. And so as a result, we need that kind of support. USC, UCLA.
Absolutely. Next question.
Georgia Leap is on this Zoom with us. She comes to mind because she's been a champion for moving forward with this movement of ours. Dr. Robert Hernandez from USC, just to name a couple. But we need that support for there's many of them that know the work that we've done.
Okay, our next question is coming to ask, is there a plan to elevate, train, and grow homegrown leadership in communities that have historically not benefited from this prevention and intervention funding that currently exists? So they want to know, are there new organizations that will be uplifted and new leaders through this proposed $400 million for Peacemakers?
Great question. Anyone want to respond to that?
I will. I think one of the things as an intervention worker, as peacemakers, I think a lot of us have already understood that our job, our role, responsibility is to duplicate ourselves. We have to find the individuals that are younger than us that have the same energy, have the same outlook, and we have to create these new leaders. The thing is to identify them. The thing is to be able to get into the midst of the community and find these people of influence and lead them in a direction. I think something that Twin said was so important, that it's not about the work that we do that scares the community. Some people have a perception, and their perception is that I want to do the work and save lives, but I don't want to work with the city. I don't want to work with the police. I don't want to have to answer these questions. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges, but it is definitely, I believe, my role and responsibility to find the next set of leadership that are 30, 32 years old and help them become the leaders, because they're already the leaders in the community. I just have to bring them to the forefront. So I think that is the role, and that's what most of it will be, not hiring 50 and 60-year-olds, not saying anything against them, but hiring these individuals. If we do hire 50-year-olds, it's to teach the 30-year-olds to take our place.
Amen, Skip. And as we look at the national landscape and federal funding coming down, is that there is a need to get dollars directly to the community-based organizations. And so that's something that we're really looking at. And in order to do that, we also have to support and help develop the smaller community-based organizations to be able to utilize those funds and administer those funds. And so that's a gap. It's one thing to get a policy win to say, hey, we're going to get, $500 million invested in intervention, but it's another thing to really help set up and build the capacity of smaller organizations that have deep roots in their communities in order to fully utilize those dollars. And so that's something that we're looking at in setting up intermediaries, private partnerships. Been talking to a number of foundations who may be interested in being able to receive those federal funds and then contract them out to the smaller community-based organizations that can do the work. And so that's something that we're really, really pushing on. Implementation is key because that's where the rubber meets the road. Go ahead, Twin.
Yes, and accountability. Because we know with money, big money like this coming, we know people are coming in that have been operating for years. They have the money, they have the capacity to come in there and write a proposal that's gonna look good on paper. But as far as doing the work, it's now going to over exceed a community-based organization, somebody that was grown in a community that knows it from the bottom to the top. And these are things that we got to be aware of, and we got to be conscious of people coming into these communities with intent just for the funding. And what we always say in our circle, we come in to do the work. The money will come in because you're not going to make a lot of money doing this work. And so we got to be mindful of who we are letting it come into this community to provide this service. So I think if we're going to allow these big agencies to come in, they have to adopt these smaller community-based organizations to do the work and work alongside with them and keep the money into the community. And that way we can be more effective and that we can work together. Because it's like you got lived experience as far as evidence-based driven agencies. And they clash, and we see it when they clash. They have most of them have the same mindset and want the same results, but we got to get to a place where we can have these hard conversations that's not going to be pleasant to get a better understanding of how we're going to help each other, because we both need each other in this work. Community-based organizations don't have the funding, the capacity to go after these major contracts, but now this money is here. We know the big time vultures, they're coming in and they don't try to oversee these community-based organizations. So we got to be mindful and hold people accountable.
Well said, Brother Twin. Go ahead, Paul.
I like that, brother. Big time vultures. Yes, sir. And I'll just add this. I was on a call yesterday with with my team, Michael McLively, Brittany, Tiffany, and we met with Chico Tillman and Erica Ford, who are, some of the national leaders that are out there in this space. Chico did a lot of time in the feds, and brother got his PhD. Erica's been, around since the 70s, I believe. And anyhow, we were having this exact same conversation. And so where we kind of arrived at was that some of these funds right now, before the 5 billion comes, there's funds coming right now. There's RFPs available right now where folks need to write grants that are coming in a month or two. And so there was a little bit of worry about how are Black and brown folks on the ground going to get that? So we talked about grant writers and, who can volunteer or who can pay for them, et cetera. But we all also agreed that the feds aren't going to give $10 million to an organization that has an $80,000 operating budget. That's just not going to happen. That's just not how it works. So what we talked about was, are there foundations out there that we trust and that we can work with? There's a lot of them in California. There's a lot of them in LA that, a group of leaders that are on this panel can sit down with them and say, listen, we're not prepared at this very moment to get those chunks of federal dollars, but can we count on you to apply with us and make sure that it's done right? And to Twin's point, that's exactly what Twin is talking about. And I'll tell you this, every time there's an incident in our communities, all these foundations have a statement. I get the emails all the time. This foundation's got a statement about what happened in Compton. They got a statement about what happened in the Valley. And it's like, okay, talking about our work in our communities all the time. Now let's sit down and let's see how you can really help us. And so that's one way. I think we should reach out to some of these foundations and have these tough conversations like Twin said, but they got to come correct.
Another perspective is making sure that in the application, it has to be RFQ, request for qualification, not request for proposal, because that brings in those writers that Twin's talking about. Oh, they can write it nice on paper and they can make music out of it. But at the end of the day, they can't bust a grape. They can't make it happen. You look at the agencies that are here. We've been out here a long time. The hardest thing to garner, it's not always the plan or the blueprint. It's the relationship. It's the trust. It's that generational network that allows you to go in and out of the neighborhoods like the tide. A lot of people can go in, some of them can't come out. So I'm just saying that because that's the spirit of that is so tangible and so relevant and so real to the work that we're all doing. We earn respect the old-fashioned way. That's from the sweat of the brow. That's from doing what you say, saying what you do, and that's how you build trust. So the trust that takes a lot of time to build, that's what we've all already acquired, and we do not take it lightly. We do not take it for granted to be able to have that privilege of trust in the different neighborhoods and the different barrios. We've earned it, and so again, I want to really push that RFQ because it'll help.
Yeah, thank you all. This is a very important conversation to have. Next question.
Sure. I think our questions naturally flowing from this conversation. We do have some funders on with us today, and one of them is asking, what are the ways philanthropy can support this work? And what is the timeline to secure commitments to our campaign? So once again, I'm going to put in the chat ways your organization can sign on and show your support for our Fund Peacemakers campaign, and let our panelists ask these questions. And I see Paul already with his hand raised.
I'll be brief. And credit to the folks in philanthropy who are on, first of all. But second, I would say, I know it's very difficult, right? Because in philanthropy foundations, folks are responsible for the money that they're giving out, and they have to make sure that it goes to good use and that it's managed properly and that there's no funny business going on, etc. But I would say some in philanthropy are used to kind of like what Blinky and Twin referred to, used to kind of floating the money to the folks they're comfortable with because they got big pockets and they can manage money. I would say don't be afraid to do a little bit harder work and help some of the smaller orgs on the ground that haven't managed those large amounts, right? What can be done to help folks like that? So there's been a lot of conversation around intermediary orgs, right? And not just orgs that are going to take the contract to create a monopoly and give folks crumbs, but that are going to do people right and help these small orgs grow.
If I could jump in real quick, I like to say that, as a smaller organization and without funding, without major funding, I found that there are so many different ways for accountability. And one of them is to have a paycheck type system, to have, because most of the money is going to go, about 70% of the money for smaller organizations goes to the payroll, goes to hiring and having people that I can now help you feed your family. So when we have different organizations whose main role is just H&R, and I think the people that we deal with charge us maybe $200 a month, but they also do all of the reporting, all of the accounting, all of the payroll taxes, all of those things. So I think there's so much that can be offered to smaller organizations where we don't have to go with, I'm not sure if you said this, Twin, but the poverty pimps, with the agencies who have the great grant writers, but will take about 50% of whatever the grant is and say that they're doing part of the work when really the work is being done by us. So I don't mind partnering and collaborating with these major organizations that know how to write the grants, but I think that for the most part, the smaller organizations can, if we just hire out to the different systems that are there to support us.
Thank you. Well said. Again, a very important conversation to have. I mean, regarding philanthropy, I think absolutely helping to build capacity of smaller community-based organizations. I think we shared about being able to kind of act as an intermediary to get dollars to flow to the smaller organizations. But also too, I would say that there's also a need to help build infrastructure around supporting the advocacy work that intervention workers are doing, right? So a lot of the groups that are part of the coalition, they're out there, they're out there in the streets addressing the pandemic, addressing violence, and it's hard for them to come together to be at coalition meetings, to be at all these speaking engagements, to go testify up in Sacramento or in the county. And so even dollars to really build more of a stronger advocacy base and leadership base for the field. I think that the leaders that are on this call and the leaders that are in the coalition, they are going to be the leaders of the peace movement. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create platforms so that they can step up and talk directly to decision makers to say, this is what our community needs. These are what our organizations need if we want to create a community-based safety ecosystem that is needed. And so I think philanthropy can really, really step in as these federal dollars come in and fill some of those gaps that are going to be needed in order to get the money to the ground and to support the folks that are on the front lines.
If I could just chime in and say that I totally agree with that. One thing you have to understand is we are the peacekeepers of the community. We are a profession. This is a professional, legitimate profession. And the thing is that we don't, all of our education does not come from books. We don't have, some of us don't have the degree on the wall from the universities and the college, but we have the degree on the wall from lived experience. And that's huge. Who better to do this? Who better to solve the problems of the community than the community? People who really genuinely care about the community. So I totally agree with like Kevin, Skipp, saying those things about, those bigger organizations. Where do we fit in these little organizations that don't have the, big grant writers and stuff like that? But we are the ones doing the work. So that's really important to remember, that when those kind of things happen, we do need to all come together. We do need to be able to include us at the table. This is a profession. The work that we're doing is professional. We're professional at saving lives.
And I just wanted to chime in on a question that was asked earlier. How do we know that intervention is really doing the work? Well, take a trip down memory lane. You got to remember that there's history to this work. You got to remember that before GRID, there was the Bridges program. Before the Bridges program, there was the STAR program. And before that, there was no program. Intervention was not sexy. Intervention was not known language. But yet we were toiling out there. So look at the numbers. I'm not a data guy either, Skipp, but look at the numbers. All the way, go back 89, 90, 91, 92, over 1,200 homicides in the city of LA. When intervention kicked in, all of a sudden, we're at the 300s. And keep in mind that one gang homicide costs us the city of LA anywhere from $7 to $8 million. Look at the savings over the course of time. Look at the reduction. It's been said by Fernando and others that for 10 consecutive years, we were under 300. But look at the numbers are going up now since COVID. And we need to broaden the base. We need to be able to hire job developers. We need to also be able to add these other components. As it is, there's many organizations need tattoo removal. There's other components, but I wanted to bring that little bit of history. So, because that's the evidence. Look at it. It's a fact.
Yeah, thank you for that, Blinky. And recently at the State of the City address by the mayor said he acknowledged peacekeepers and said that, he wanted to make sure that they got the raises they deserved, but also that they're treated as professionals, right, for the work that they do, right? And that's coming a long way. So we have to make sure that one is that those raises happen and that we continue to push to broaden the scope of community-based public safety efforts. And some people, just think that, hey, we can get money out and put more intervention workers on the street, but there's also dollars, as Blinky was saying, for job developers, you need case managers, you need other folks and other infrastructures in order to have 1,000 peacemakers in a city. What does it take? It's not enough to pay 1,000 peacemakers. There's training infrastructure, there's support networks, accountability, as Twin was saying, that need to be invested in as well in order to make that flow and to make it work. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, in the chat, we're just seeing a lot of people wondering how they can get involved, next steps, and how to support. So I did drop in on the chat how you can sign on with the link to provide your organization's information. We recently sent a letter supporting our $400 million call to the mayor and the city council members. We will be revising that letter with additional sign-ons, I believe, by next week. So it's important if your organization does want to become involved with this, that you do provide the information on that link. Fernando, do you have any other words you want to say as we conclude today? We're about out of time.
All right, we just we'll wrap it up. We just want to thank everybody for joining us. Please check out the Fund Peacemakers campaign. We're going to be working on it statewide as well, and in alliance with our brothers and sisters across the country for the National Fund Peace campaign. Stay tuned for more information, and we're going to keep pushing. Thank you to all the peacemakers who are out there doing the work every day. For the people that have joined us, keep us in your thoughts and prayers, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And thank you to the panelists. Great job.